Welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids Podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. It means so much to me that you are listening today. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. I am thankful that you're here. Yes, it's November, so now we have to say that we're thankful for everything, but I am truly grateful for you. If this is your first time listening, I'm glad you're here as well. Be sure to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, like I said before, it's November, and so we're going to kick things off with some gratitude, but I want to put a fun spin on it. I think a lot of times we think about saying the things we're grateful for around the Thanksgiving table. And I love that. That's one of my favorite traditions, going around and everyone naming something they're grateful for. But what if we started this month out by saying those things out loud now? Like when we think of them. So when we see something we're thankful for, like, I'm so thankful for my friend, or wow, I am so grateful that I packed an extra snack today in my lunchbox. Things like that. Just saying those things that we're thankful for, but saying them out loud and letting someone else know that we're thankful. I wonder if we were to spread this gratitude out loud and more people can hear about it and find things they're thankful for. So let's try it. On the count of 3, I want you to say something that you're thankful for. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I am also thankful for those things. If I could hear you, I'm sure I would have agreed with that. Well, today I am very thankful for my special guest. Her name is Janine McNally, and she was originally a high school teacher in Australia, and then she moved to the United States to go to seminary. Now she is pursuing her doctorate at another seminary called Grace School of Theology. She is the founder and director of Grace for Kids, a nonprofit dedicated to producing gospel-centered resources for children's ministry leaders. In her spare time, she's a curriculum writer, a research fellow, an adjunct professor, and has just published her first book, When You See Fireflies, equipping parents and leaders to minister effectively to Generation Alpha. She passionately believes that now is a time to reach kids for Jesus. And I agree with that. She has been involved for over 40 years in children's ministry, as well as pastoral and church planning ministry alongside her husband. She passionately believes that now is the time to reach kids for Jesus, that children's ministry is the most strategic ministry in the church. Janine and her husband, Gary, have been married for 30 years and live in Jensen Beach, Florida. I loved my conversation with Janine, and I learned so much about Generation Alpha, which is you guys, and I learned a lot about fireflies. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation with my friend, Janine McNally. Janine, thank you so much for being on the Collide Kids Podcast today.
You bet. I'm excited.
Yes, I am so excited for our listeners to learn about you and your book and your resources. So will you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm an Aussie from Australia. I grew up in Melbourne and I went to school there. Obviously, I became a teacher, a high school teacher. And then I loved school. You guys might not like school very much, but I loved it. I loved learning. So I went on and I did my college degree and I wanted to keep going and learn more. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but I taught for 4 years in high school and then I took leave and I went to a smaller city called Adelaide. And there I went and studied the Bible for 3 years. And I finished that, wanted to do even more. The Bible was originally translated into Greek and Hebrew, and I had done some Greek and I wanted to learn some Hebrew. So I came all the way over to America and I went to a school in Dallas called Dallas Theological Seminary, and I studied there for 2 years. And now, 25 years later, I know, yes, I'm really old, but 25 years later, I'm doing my doctorate and I'm nearly finished. So I love to teach. So that's what I did.
That's amazing. Tell us the name of your book.
My book is called When You See Fireflies.
Okay. I am excited to talk to you about this book today. But before we do that, because this is a show for kids, I always like to ask my guests to tell me a joke. So, do you have a joke for us today?
I don't. But I have some cool information. Since my book was about fireflies, sort of, I thought we could talk a bit about fireflies. They're really cool. You guys might know them by a different name, like lightning bugs. Some people call them forest stars or glowflies. And there are over 2,000 different kinds of fireflies.
Wow.
I learned this when I was writing my book. I had no idea. And they live only for about 2 months. Very short lifespan. And as you know, fireflies light up. Well, these little patterns of light that they flash, they're unique to their species. So every different species have different ways of lighting up, and they use them either to attract a mate or to keep away predators. And no one really knows why they blink the way they do, but they're really cool. And my kids used to go outside, and we had a bunch of fireflies in the backyard, and they would go out and play, and they knew when it got dark and the fireflies started to light up, it was time to come inside, because nothing good ever happens at nighttime. That's what I taught my kids. All the bad stuff happens at nighttime. So when it's dark, come on in. So that's where the book got its name from fireflies.
I love that. That is so interesting. I had no idea there was 2,000 species. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
How they counted them. How do you count fireflies? I have no idea.
Who was the poor person that had to figure that out, right? That's so good. I love learning that's where your title came from. So just give us a quick idea of your book, what it's about and who it's for.
Sure. So I wrote it specifically for parents and leaders, people who lead children. They were born between 2010 and 2024, and they've been called Generation Alpha. And you guys are going to be the biggest generation ever in the world. There are more than 2.5 million born every week.
Wow.
That's a lot of alphas everywhere.
Yeah.
And you know what? You guys are growing up in a time unlike anybody else has ever experienced. So that makes you guys different. Mm-hmm. Even though you're still kids, you're different because your world is very different.
Yeah. So this book is really for parents and leaders and teachers who are working with Generation Alpha. And that's who's listening to this podcast today, right? Those families and kids that are part of Generation Alpha. So you said the oldest Generation Alpha right now is 13.
They turned 13 this year,
okay.
Yes.
To whoever's born now. And so what is it about this generation? Like you said, they're one of the largest. What do we know about this generation?
So for starters, you guys are way global. You can get access from anywhere at any time. Mm-hmm. So you know all about the trends that are going on. You can Google and find information about all sorts of things. That's not always good because you're young and you can't necessarily tell what's good and what's not good. But that's definitely something about you. Another thing is you're very social. You love to communicate and connect with your technology devices like texting. I may be aging myself here when I talk about FaceTime. I heard about a new thing called Discord where they communicate with each other. So you're very social. You're obviously very digital. You guys are the very first generation to have been born completely into technology. The rest of us got our devices gradually. Right. Like when we were 13, maybe we got our laptop for school. And when we were 15, maybe we got a phone. And then the phones became smartphones and could do all sorts of things other than just talking to people. So you guys have been born into it from the time, it's already there from the time you were born. Laptops, iPads had begun the same year your generation began. So in 2010, that's when iPads became a thing. Yeah. So now you're born and bam, it's all there already. So you guys may never use a rotary phone or a floppy disk or a fax machine or even a phone book.
Right. That's so true.
When I was teaching my kids, I homeschooled my kids, and when they were young, we had encyclopedias, 25-volume encyclopedias. You guys don't need that anymore. Mm-hmm. You probably will never write a check to pay for a bill.
I remember seeing a video once where this little baby was holding a magazine and he was trying to do the thing where he enlarges the picture on the magazine. Like he didn't understand, like swipe, and the magazine was not complying with his
That's, yeah, I mean, and you're very visual. You're used to seeing things on apps and video games
Yeah.
and like you're swiping, so you love to be hands-on, and you're also going to be more mobile. You will move. It's projected that you're going to move around a lot for work and study and travel and even where you live. So you're very, very unique in that the world you're growing up in is different from the world we grew up in. Some people think you're addicted to technology. I happen to think you're going to be experts in
Hmm.
technology when you grow up. You're going to be doing things that we can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's so true. It feels like, as a parent of Generation Alpha, it feels like I'm still trying to keep up and then also kind of hold my kids back from being exposed to too much. So, like, how are parents supposed to navigate this? You know, like with all the technology you were just talking about and all the different things, because some parents I know, they haven't given their kids a phone. So does that mean they're not exposed to technology?
I think that's a balance issue. Parents have to decide where the boundaries are for them.
Hmm.
Parenting is always a very personal process. You decide what you think is best for your kids. You know your children the best out of anybody. You know whether their personality tends towards being addictive by the way they behave when they do get their hands on technology. Do you have to rip it away from them, or when you invite them to go outside and play, they're happy to go?
Hmm.
So you've got to decide where are the boundaries. Obviously, you want to keep them safe. There's so much out there now
Right.
with the dangers involved in technology. We were at the bank yesterday just getting some money out to pay for a new camper we're buying. They wouldn't even let us take all our money out. And we asked them, it's like, our money, what are you doing? And they said, well, there's so many things out there where people are stealing money through your phone and the internet and fraud and stuff. So the bank has to change everything because of technology,
Wow.
because of all the bad things that are out there. So parents have to change things, put boundaries in as well for how far they want their kids to go when they give them their first phone.
Hmm.
I personally, if I was raising kids now, I think it would be really difficult to start with, but I'd be keeping the phones out of their hands almost for as long as possible until they needed them. I led a VBS last year, and there was 8-year-olds walking around with smartphones, and I'm like, why do they need smartphones at that point? So it's like there's a part of me was like, whoa, wait a minute, you don't need it that
Right.
early. But at the same time, it's good for them to have something. So whether it's a tablet where they can learn the ins and outs of the basic, you can't take it away. Whether we like it or not, technology is here to stay. So moms and dads have to figure out, how do I balance that?
Right.
What do I allow them to do and when do I allow them to do it? It's tricky.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had other people come on here and talk about too that I think if we shelter too much or if we hold back too much, they're going to find a way to get exposed to it outside of the home. So I would rather my kids learn how to navigate and use this as a resource and a tool with my parental supervision than getting exposed to it with their friends or at school.
Get down on the floor and play the game with them and watch what they're doing. My niece, she's not much younger than me, but she's a pediatric speech pathologist. And she had to go and evaluate a 3-year-old. I guess she was having speech problems. She visited the home and just sat down and observed, which was what they did on their first visit. And the 3-year-old was on the floor with her iPad. Mom was on the couch with her phone. And my niece watched them and said, you know what, Mom, put your phone down, get down on the floor and play with your daughter. Put the iPad away, put the phone away. She said within 3 months, that little girl didn't need me anymore. Her speech had no problem. All she needed was someone to play with her, to talk with her, to communicate. And honestly, we're pretty guilty of being on our phones too much ourselves.
Yes.
So as parents, I think we need to put them down, play with our kids, and like you said, introduce some basic technology to them and work and play with them on that so that you can create those realistic boundaries and protect them.
Absolutely. So if they're born into technology, they understand it probably way more than we do. I've heard this before that even though this generation knows so much about connecting with people, they're not very good at connecting with people. So what do you know about that, about how they're connecting with friends and things like that?
I know everybody wants to have friends. It is fun and cool to have a lot of friends on social media. It makes you look popular, and you can connect with them and talk with them and text them. But let's face it, you're never going to tell them the real truth about what you're like. You want to show them how cool you are, and you want to portray yourself as being the best you can be. It's really not bottom line who you are. So when you're doing this social media and communicating with your friends, you're putting on a good front, which means that you're not really being genuine, which means that those relationships don't get past the surface. And even though you're interacting a lot, it really isn't meaningful communication. Mm-hmm. So the end result, you may have a big number of friends, but you feel lonely. Why? Because you're really not engaging with them in a meaningful way. You're just doing it in a superficial way. So that's one of the things. There are traits about Generation Alpha, but that's one of the resulting consequences of all this technology. It tends to keep you lonely, give you poor communication skills, and a false sense of emotional intimacy with other people and how to relate to them.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So I love that you've done all this research about Generation Alpha, and I think it's really important that families and parents and teachers and people get to know what it's all about. But why did you write this book? Like, why were you interested in making this resource for Generation Alpha?
Oh, because no one's talking about them, and they're here already. When I started to do the research on this, there was one book about to be published. It was by the guy who actually came up with the name Generation Alpha. He's an Australian, believe it or not. He's a sociologist, a research sociologist. So he had done a lot of study on who's this next generation. And the oldest is 13. We're about to start the next generation. And if you Google Generation Alpha, there's very little out there written about them. There's more now than a year ago, but nothing was written about them in terms of what we do with you guys in the church. How do we adapt to your different needs and characteristics? Nothing was written. A couple of articles here and there, but people are still talking about Generation Z. They're starting to wake up and think about Alpha, but by the time they do, they're going to almost be into the next generation. So I saw that families are leaving the church. They don't feel connected to the church. They feel the church is irrelevant. They're struggling to believe things about the Bible because they haven't been taught to think well, and they're leaving. And I saw that and I almost panicked thinking, oh my gosh, these guys are leaving and we're not even talking about them yet. We haven't even started to discuss what do we do with them. So that's how it started. And yeah, I'm just doing more and more about how to parent these guys. What do we do and what is coming next? I'm guessing it's Generation Beta. How much different are they going to be? It's going to be interesting. I think, honestly, Alphas have gone through some of the most difficult times that we've had. Obviously, there's the bad news 24/7. And then on top of all that we're so accustomed to, right in the middle of it comes what? A worldwide pandemic. What is a worldwide pandemic? We have never seen one in our lifetime. COVID comes along and these little kids are exposed to it, and they imagine how they must have felt being isolated, our faces covered up. So you've got that on top of everything. It's been a very confusing time. Hopefully betas won't have the same.
Yeah. I love that you said, that they've been through so much, because it's true. It's been so strange to be a parent of someone. How do you navigate that? And so I love that you've written this resource for these parents and leaders. So what do they need? Like, what can we do for Generation Alpha? What do they need?
What do they need? Oh my goodness, you better read my dissertation for that one. It's so much. Honestly, the church needs to come alongside these parents. Parents today, I think, are overwhelmed. They're juggling so many balls in the air. I just finished doing a survey of 90 children's ministry leaders and educators and asked them, what are some of the issues that are out there and how are parents feeling and all that, questions all about that stuff. And they talked about how one of the biggest thing was that the families are super busy. Church tends to get a lack of prioritizing over sports and all the different activities they're taking their kids to. How do you balance all that as a parent? You don't want to, again, isolate them from doing those things, but there needs to be balance. When we were raising our 3 kids, we gave them the opportunity to do one extracurricular activity, only one, because I knew the danger of running from thing to thing to thing. And that is honestly, out of all my survey questions and all the responses, the most consistent and highest number of responses came in on that families are too busy and too pressured, and that makes them feel overwhelmed, doesn't give them any margin, any time to think about how to put good boundaries in place. They just run from thing to thing. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there, I think, being a parent.
We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app. Yeah, absolutely. That's a rule in my house too, is we only do one thing at a time. So if we're doing a sport or an activity, that's the thing we're committed to until it's finished. And then we try a new thing or we start a new thing. But just for the sake of our family time too, like that's important for us to be together. Like you said, it's important for us to go to church. And so we just have to make those things priority. I think our kids need to see that Jesus is important to us, that the church and our faith is vital to our family surviving and doing what we're supposed to do. So I love that you said this earlier, that Generation Alpha is very receptive. And so how do they respond to the gospel? Tell us about how Generation Alpha responds to Jesus.
Well, statistics tell us that the majority of people become Christians, trust in Jesus for their salvation, between the ages of 4 and 14. I was around the age of 4. Our 3 kids were 4, 5 years old, really young. And some people think that you can't understand at that point, and I disagree with that. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me." Those kids in the Bible at that point were sitting on their parents' laps. They were young. And so I don't think there's any age too early to start talking to your kids about what Jesus did for us and how we make sure that we're going to heaven one day when we die. And the statistics tell us that about 3/4 of us trust Jesus during those, I call it the 4-14 window. Between 4 and 14, there's a very high receptivity at that point. I think because children find it so easy to believe things, their lack of pride, they know that they're not big and strong and competent, and the idea of getting themselves to heaven by doing good things, I think, is beyond their understanding. They know they've done bad things. The understanding that they're a sinner is, I think, very clear to them. They know good and bad. I did the wrong thing. I lied to my mom. I disobeyed. I hit my brother. I was mean to my sister. They understand very simplistically that they're sinners. Romans 3:23, we've all sinned, we've all done the wrong thing, and we know that this standard of perfection is very difficult to reach, to the point of being impossible. I give the illustration of saying, pick up a rock and let's see if we can throw it all the way to the North Pole. You may get it further than I do, but neither of us can get close to that distance. And God's standard is being perfect. And for a child to think that they can be that good or that perfect, they know they can't. When we get older, it's like, oh yeah, I can do good things. I'm a pretty good person. So that, I think, impedes our belief that Jesus died on the cross and did everything that we need in order to go to heaven. And then we need to teach them that the wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. That death there is talking about being separated from God.
Right.
God is perfect and holy, and we're a sinner. That means we're separated from him. Perfection is perfect. It's 100%. If you have a glass of water and you put one drop of cyanide in there, it's no longer perfect.
Right.
It's been contaminated, and one sin makes us a sinner. One sin means we're not perfect. He is perfect, we're not. And then to understand that because that sin that we've done results in death, somebody has to die to pay for that sin. Jesus came along and said, guys, I will pay for your sin penalty, which is incredible because he had never sinned. And yet he was taking our penalty on him, and he died on the cross in our place. Romans 5:8 says God commends his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So he took our place. He paid our penalty. It would be like me saying to someone with cancer who was dying, let me take all of those cancer cells, if this was possible, let me take those cancer cells out of you and put them into my body. What would happen to you? You would live because you have no cancer. What would happen to me? I would die. And he took the sin cancer and put it on him, and he died in our place, which is unbelievable. And all he wants us to do is to believe that. John 3:16, God loves the world so much that he died on the cross, and all we need to do is believe. So that's what I think is critical for Alpha generation. With all of the stuff that's going on in the world, they need Jesus. That's the only way to solve any of their issues. They need him in their lives. They need to be able to rely on him as they grow up. And that 4 to 14-year-old window is when they're the most receptive. So parents, leaders, that's when we need to be talking to them about how to be saved. We can teach them that. Of course, we can't force them to believe, but if we teach it well and they can be convinced that it's true, then they've got their whole life ahead of them to live with Jesus and his power in our lives.
Yeah. And if someone who's in Generation Alpha has Jesus influencing them, they're going to be a positive influence in the world around them, and they're going to change the world because they have that love of Jesus and that purpose for reaching other people. So I think it, like you said, it's so important. They're so receptive and they need to hear it. We don't need to wait. Like you said, I also got saved when I was very young. I was probably about 4 or 5. And I think to understand all of it before you can become a Christian is not in the Bible.
But I don't understand it all yet.
Right. We're still learning.
Yes.
So that's not actually true that they have to fully understand every part of it in order to accept Jesus. If they just know who he is and they believe, like you said, that he died on the cross for their sins and they can recognize their need for Jesus in their life, then they're ready. And parents, we don't need to hold them back from that. Leaders, we don't need to hold them back from that. Today is the day for salvation. And so I just encourage parents listening right now, if your kids have not made that decision yet, you haven't had that conversation with them, I invite you to talk to them about that today and just ask them where they are and what they think and what they believe. And I think you'll be surprised.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I am so thankful that you have written this book for families and for leaders. And I think it's really important that people read this and get acquainted with Generation Alpha before the next generation comes up. We need to know what's happening right now. So where can our readers find out more about your book?
It's on Amazon. It's on my website, which is Grace for Kids. Grace, the number 4, and kids with a Z. It's there. You can get it in ebook form, regular paperback, and then if you buy either of those two, you get the audiobook for free, or you can just buy the audiobook on its own.
That's awesome. Now, is it you reading the audiobook?
It is.
Yes. I need that Aussie accent.
I know. People told me people will enjoy reading it because they get to listen to you, and I had never done anything like that, so that was a unique experience. But yes, the audiobook is included with the book for free. And, if you're an auditory learner, that's something you can do, listen in the car and when you're traveling from sports to sports.
That's right. I like to listen to audiobooks so much because it really helps me. I feel the need to be productive all of the time. And so if I'm doing dishes or I'm doing things around the house or I'm driving somewhere, having that in gets me through it, So I love that you have an audiobook, and I always appreciate it when the author reads it. So that's great. Well, Janine, thank you so much for sharing all that you did today, and thank you for being on the show. Before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So I'd love to hear what your memory is.
So from the time I was little, my mom tells me 2, 3, 4 years old, I wanted to be a teacher. And I used to grab my siblings and make them sit down, and I would teach them. We had a chalkboard, and I would teach them math. That's what I ended up becoming, was a math teacher, but I taught them everything. And if they wouldn't do it, I got all my teddy bears, and I lined them all up in a row, and I would teach my teddy bears how to count and add and all sorts of things. So from that very time I wanted to be a teacher. I never changed my mind. I never even looked at other things. And a bunch of years later, that's what I did. I became a teacher. So my memory is, and my lesson from that is, hey, you guys may be really little and you may have a dream of what you want to be when you grow up. Don't let go of that dream. Just keep on going, do your school, learn what you need to do, and become what you want to do. You can be anything you want. So I would encourage you, don't give up on your dreams. Keep on going.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm laughing so much because that is exactly what I did to my brother and sister when we were younger. I was the oldest, and they were like, we want to play Barbies. We want to play Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, nope, have a seat. It's time for class. And I would teach them. They never got a choice. That's right. It was fun for me. I don't know if they had fun. And I think, like you said, I think God puts a dream in our heart. And I think sometimes it may not look the way we thought it was going to look, but God uses that to propel us to the next thing. So don't let go of those dreams. You never know what God wants to do with those things. So great encouragement. Thank you, Janine, so much for being on the show today. This was awesome.
I loved it. Thank you.
Wow, such good encouragement from her today. I love that she told us to follow our dreams. It's so true. Those things that God puts in you at the very beginning, you never know what he wants to do with those. She had such great information about Generation Alpha, which is you guys, those people that are born between the years of 2010 and 2024. And it is the biggest generation ever in the world. More than 2.5 million babies are born every week. Isn't that amazing? Learning so much about your generation and how you communicate and learn and navigate the world is very helpful for parents and teachers and leaders. And that's why Janine wrote this book. But I think it's so incredible that her heart for that is for kids to know Jesus. She said the majority of people that choose to become Christians are around the ages of 4 and 14. That's a statistic that's been around for a long time, and it's still true. And I'm so grateful that she shared with us what it means to become a Christian. You know, that verse we quoted in there, John 3:16, it says, for God so loved the world, that means everyone, that he gave his one and only son, who is Jesus, that whoever believes in Jesus will not perish, but will have eternal life. It's the decision that you can make today to follow Jesus. If you have not made that decision, no matter what age you are, whether you're a parent or a grandparent or a leader, or you're 4 years old or you're 8 years old, you can make a decision to follow Jesus today. You don't have to wait to become a Christian to when you're an adult or when you understand everything. Like we said, it's a lifelong journey of learning and growing, but knowing Jesus is the most important decision you will ever make. And today is a great day for salvation. If you'd like to learn more about Janine and her book, you can go to her website, grace4kids.com, and check out her book and resources. And if you made a decision today to follow Jesus or you'd like more information, I would love to connect with you on social media or on email. Please reach out to me, Christen at collidekidspodcast.com, or head over to my social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. And I would be so excited to learn that. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is a joke from my friend, John.
Why can you not trust trees?
Why?
Because they're super shady.
They are super shady. That was a good one. I like that joke, John. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, if you would like to be like John and share your favorite joke or maybe a Bible verse or a quote or something exciting that's happened in your life, or you want to sing a song, anything you want to share, just head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab at the top that says Kids Only, or you can find information about how to send it to me through my social media. Like I said, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at the Collide Kids Pod. Hey, if you'd like to support the podcast, there's a few ways you can do that. You can follow and subscribe to this podcast. You can leave a rating and a review. That's a great way to support the podcast. You can also share this episode with friends and family and tell them why you like to listen, why you're thankful for the podcast. Or you can go by my website and click the link at the top that says support. And anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Well, I hope you guys have an amazing week. I hope you remember to say the things you're grateful for out loud. Let people know that you're grateful all month long. And I'll be doing that right along with you. In case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.